Let me sit down right here.
Okay, we are live.
Right. I don't know who these people are now. I'm going to let Carolina, if you would take control of admitting people, because some of the people I may not know or be familiar with their names. Good evening or afternoon. This is Paula Hall. I'm chair of the Audit and Finance Subcommittee for Sweetwater Union High School District, and today is our scheduled meeting for the committee. It's 4 p.m. and we will begin with this call to order at 4:01. So before we begin, are there any public comments, Carolina?
No, Trustee Hall, we do not have any public comments this evening.
All right, then we'll get started with our items for discussion. First, let's call roll, and everybody can go around and popcorn their presence. So just go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm Paula Hall. I already did that. Go ahead and introduce yourself if you're here as a part of the committee, and then we'll have Dr. Sockald introduce everyone else.
Hi, Nick Segura, trustee, Area 4.
Hi, Lisa Schmidt, member.
Thank you, Trustee Hall and committee members. We've got from the finance team here today. So you got myself, Jenny Salkel, Chief Financial Officer. And then I'll introduce some of our managers here. We have Donald Prince, who's our purchasing manager. We have Elizabeth Reyes, who's our accounting manager. We have Maria Prince, who's our reporting manager. Nancy Piccone, who's our director of fiscal services. We have Athena Quarles, who's our debt finance manager. And I want to make sure, I think I've got Vanessa Garcia, who's our payroll manager. I think those are the members from the finance team. And then also we do have our external auditor team from Crow, Elizabeth Sav and Charles Ribley, sorry about that. And then I'll defer over to our internal auditors. And we also do have a few other directors that are here and they can introduce themselves as well because of some of our audit items that we have.
Thank you. Go ahead, and we also have, go ahead and Dr. Aguirre, would you like to introduce the other staff that's on the call and yourself?
Hi, Trustee Hall. Let me see if I can get everybody sure. Looks like the superintendent. I see we have Jason Brust from Planning and Construction. I'm trying to see, just going down the line. I see we have Omar De Leon from Communications. And I think everybody else was introduced, but if I missed somebody, please.
Anna Pedrosa is on the call.
Anna.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, Anna, to those that may not be familiar with you. And Eric.
Thank you. This is Anna Pedrosa, Chief Human Resources Officer. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Go ahead, Eric.
Eric Span.
Eric Span, Director of Nutrition Services, and I'm sorry my camera is not working at the moment. So
no problem. Thank you for being here. I appreciate everyone's presence on the call. So we're going to go to our first item, which is the audits from. You want to take this and kind of move us along?
Sure, Trustee Hall.
Dr. Sockeld.
Sure. And just one note to our internal auditors, we've got Gerardo Moreno, Daphne Enriquez. I think they're both on. Yeah. So Trustee Hall and committee members, what we'd like to share with you, we've got Elizabeth Sav and Charles Ribley, as I mentioned earlier. They are with Crow, and we're bringing forward to the committee a request or recommendation for their contract extension. They've helped us over the course of the last 3 years. According to the RFP, they completed the 2018-19 audit, the 2019-20, and also the 2021. And so their contract at this point, again, our recommendation is to exercise the remaining 2-year option. And that work, because we then would need the committee for the recommendation via Trustee Hall to bring forward to the board meeting on March 14th. The specific engagements, and that's the next item on the agenda, but we first would like to talk about that that contract extension.
All right. Do we have any questions on the item from our committee members? I would. It looks like Mr. Segura may be Trustee Segura may be frozen, but I just want to say I support extending this offering. I am fully supportive of it, and to recommend that to the board. I think Crow has done a really good job and a thorough job with all the audits
Yeah,
that we have, all three. And yes.
You can
Okay.
hear
Go
me. I
ahead.
have like a really, really bad connection.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. Are you there still? I see his name on there, but I'm not sure if he's still on the call or if. But I guess we'll wait a few minutes to see if he wants to make a comment. Lisa, did you have a comment?
No, Chair Hall, I was just going to lean on your expertise and experience, having, served on this committee longer and going by on your words and recommendation.
Well, I think as a board member, I felt that they have really done not only a thorough job with their audits and been very professional in the conduct of that and how they look at the relationship with Sweetwater and their team, but also when we as board members on the subcommittee, I usually meet with the head auditor on a one-to-one basis with the partner, and I've done that for the last 3 years. And from the very start, they have done a really wonderful job. He has done a great job of walking me through the various pieces of the audit and really giving me a deeper explanation at times when necessary. I thought that was, and also the willingness to adjust to our schedules when we're able to meet and do those things is very good. So I think the accessibility we have as board members and now, oversight on this function, I think it's been really good. And I very much appreciated it. So that's one of the reasons why I feel like staying with them for the next 2 years minimum is a very good thing. And it's well within our board policy to do that and within state law. State law requires that you go back out after 6 years with the same auditor. I believe it's 6 years.
5 years, Trustee Hall. The
5
code
years.
is 5 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we will be going short, and time flies. As you know, it just goes by fast for everyone on the committee except the people doing the work, right? So for us, it seems like it's just yesterday we were meeting about this, the 2021 audit. And so I really feel confident that we'll be getting the same treatment and on schedule information from the team as we need. So, yes. Trustee Segura, do you have any comment?
No, I would just agree wholeheartedly with your statement. I don't need to go on, but I truly appreciate their partnership and all the work and guidance and making sure that we understand everything before us. And I just truly appreciate all the work and I agree with you wholeheartedly that we should continue on with them.
Thank you. I think part of that is too that we have some challenges that we're still working with, transferring to a new system, doing some of those. So they're really familiar with all of those different impacts to our staff and our systems and what our requirements are moving forward. So I think moving to a different team at this point would not serve us well either. So I think we'll take that recommendation to the board. If everyone on the committee is in agreement, just raise your hand. Yeah, okay, thank you. So now we'll go ahead. Were there any questions on any of the engagement letters that we had? You had those to read through over the weekend. I'm sure you had a wonderful time doing that. So if there's, I feel like they've given us a really in-depth letters on both accounts on all three. So I think we are good with that. If there's any special, I don't think there's any special request for additions to this.
Yeah.
So I would say we would recommend, go ahead and
I
if
was
you
gonna
want to
I was gonna
highlight
say
some of it.
Trustee Hall. Yeah, I was gonna say Trustee Hall, there is something to note is the school facility bond audits are new. That's not been typically in the scope. The district actually received 6, so there's actually 7 that we've got here, but 6 letters thus far. We know there's gonna be a 7th project from the Office of Public School Construction. So there is very unique scope, and I'd like Elizabeth to highlight that because it is
Yes,
working with our
That's right. That's a
facility
new
team.
one,
So
right?
that is, we'll have the district financial audit and then our bond proposition O, and then now these additional specific project-based audits.
That just came out in the law, right? Yes.
It's
that
just
was-
a recent request. They based
Right.
upon review of the expenditure reports that they have selected. So we wanted to go through that.
All right. Thank you.
A few years ago, the OPSC or the Office of Public School Construction, they typically would perform these audits themselves. And I'm not sure exactly what all the rationale is, but I'm gathering they were overwhelmed with the workload that was out there. And there was a lot of these bonds that were going to be, or these grant monies that were going to be approved and sent out. So they decided to shift that over to the audit guide, to put that onto the external auditors to do those. So it is similar in this essence of, you have those Prop 39 bond audits, but it's very specific to certain projects, certain funding. And so the engagement letter is written in a way to just address, so we don't have to issue a new contract for every single project. It's just to kind of capture, okay, this is an amount not to exceed per project, because some of them could have 100 expenditures that we have to test and write a report around, or some of them could have 5. So we just wanted to kind of do a ballpark there, and fall within those guidelines. There's different types as well. So I think the information I've gotten back from OPSC on the Sweetwater project so far is that they're non-financial hardship projects. So they should be fairly straightforward, but you will see a separate report that's issued for each individual project.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's the one piece I forgot to mention about or to shine a light on. So I thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. There's no other questions around this. We'll be moving a recommendation that the board accept our recommendation to accept these engagement letters and move forward with extending the contract for 2 more years. All right. All right. So that will be our recommendation at the next board meeting in March. Now,
And then Trustee Hall, if I could add on,
yes,
if I can add on that too, we'll start to work upon the board action next month. We'll start to work with the CROW team to identify the schools that will be selected for the ASB audits, the attendance audits. That work will commence around the May timeframe. And then we'll start to also plan the summer work. We'll do some field work at that point, and then also into the fall. So we'll start to sequence that and we'll bring it back to the committee with that timeline.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so is that ongoing and completed external audit and reviews? You want to?
That'll be that's a different item. So I'll have Carolina pull that up. But at this point, I think for Elizabeth and Charles, then they're good to go then, right?
All right. Right. Thank you very much for being here.
Happy Monday.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes, and as Carolina pulls the schedule up, this is why we also have quite a few of our colleagues here, various directors, because from a program standpoint, they help support some of these reviews or audits. So as an example, the first one we did bring back last time from the committee standpoint that we did receive a notice from an administrative review of the Child and Adult Care Food Program for the 21-22 fiscal year. They have selected the month of December. So we've been working very closely with Mr. Eric Spann out of Nutrition Services to provide financial information related to the claim, look at various documents from a purchasing standpoint. They've asked for contracts and so forth for some of our providers, looking at invoices for things that have been paid. So we've been working very closely with both Liz and Dawn in those areas to provide that. And again, facilitating that with Eric Spann. And so it's in the works right now. It's at the early stages. They've just started to request information. So we should anticipate having something in the near future that we can report back to the committee, but we're at the early stages. But Eric's available here if you've got any questions.
Okay. Well, does either of our committee members have any questions? I was wondering, this is for the 21-22 year or the
21-22, and it's very specific, right, Eric? They're looking at the December claim specifically. Is that right?
That is correct. It is just for this year and just for the month of December.
Okay, thank you. And go ahead.
Oh, no, these are customary, I guess, that different departments are chosen at random.
Eric, on this one, I know from a CDE type of review process, that's usually every 3 to 5 years, but this one's very specific to this program.
Correct. So we are on schedule for every 5 years for audit. They made an adjustment to it over 2 years ago. It used to be every 3 years. Now it's every 5 years. And this is just our annual, this is just our time for our review.
Oh, so we haven't had one since 3 years ago.
Correct.
Okay. And after this one, it's going to be 5 years that they'll come back to revisit?
So, yes. So the way this will work is the way our timing is set up. We will have our supper audit, which we're currently in. The next audit cycle for us will be for our National School Lunch and School Breakfast program. And I'm waiting for notification as to when that may start. I know that COVID has pushed back a couple of audits for people, so I'm just waiting for CDE to let us know when that audit will take place.
And does a lot of that revolve around lunch applications that we haven't? How is that going to impact our work?
So for the supper one we're currently in, since they're looking at our December claim, basically they're focusing in on our meal counts. We used this year a few waivers that USDA allowed, and they just want to make sure that we have been applying those waivers properly. So they're going to look at our meal counts as well as what Dr. Salkel mentioned earlier. They're looking at our purchasing and procurement, and they're going to just want to make sure that we serve the correct meals that we stated that we would do when we apply for the waivers. So as we move into the National School Lunch Program, they again will look at those same type of items. They will add in a little bit more in regards to applications, but since we haven't done applications due to COVID-19, they won't ask to review those for us, just really making sure that our processes have been in place with what the USDA has allowed for states through California Department of Education, and then for us as a school district to operate in. So they'll look at our meal patterns, they'll look at ensuring that we have processes in place to claim the correct number of meals. And that data is, we already basically captured that, and we're just getting prepared for it in the event that we're going to be audited next year.
And you mentioned this includes the food distributions as well.
No. So depending on which year the audit for National School Lunch will look at, they most likely won't look at 2019-20, excuse me, 2021, which is where we were doing the community feeding. This audit is specifically for December supper, and they're only looking at what we were doing on campus because we were not feeding the community at that time. And so the National School Lunch Program will be the same. They'll pick a month in 2022, 23, if that's our year that they're going to audit. They'll look at a month for our program, and then we'll have to provide all the meal counts and information with our financials for that particular month as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Back to you, I suppose, if you had no other questions, we'll send it back to Dr. Sawkill.
Thank you, Eric. So Trustee Hall, for committee members, the next item, and we have a few folks joining us here from HR and from payroll to help with this item if there's any questions there as well. As we shared at our previous committee, we received a notice the district did back in May of last year, a review that CalPERS would be doing regarding pay schedules and pay rates. And as you can see from the extensive report, they did complete that around the holidays in December. It's a 200+ report, but it's not just Sweetwater. They actually did a comprehensive review of various school districts up and down the state. And then Sweetwater's is on specifically page 178 of our labeling, of our numbering. Oh, there, Carolina's already there. And from that, they had been in contact with us on some areas that they had identified. And so there's two observations that they noted. The first one, and this one is going to be brought forward to the board in March, the March 14th meeting. It was specific to pay schedules that were for the in years 2015 and in 2017. There are 3 specific schedules. So we're going to be bringing that forward in essence as a ratification. And the representative that we've been working with at CalPERS is aware of those details. So we have that one that's going to be forthcoming to address observation 1. Now, observation 2 is a little bit more, and we're still working with CalPERS. We've actually now also had to engage the County Office of Education. It's regarding a longevity stipend and how that's accounted for in the base pay and how they want us to carve that out going forward. But then they want us to go back and address it going back to like January 2015. And so hence that's why we've had to engage the County Office of Education, because they help us with the reporting aspect of it. Anything to do with pensions, whether it's CalSTRS or CalPERS, we have to facilitate that via the County Office of Education. And so we had a call not too long ago, about a week or so, of working through some specifics and the specific data set that they want us to go back to. So it is being addressed, but it's not completely remedied just yet until we get further clarification from CalPERS to actually narrow down the group of employees, both active or those who've left the district already, and then how we can address the update going forward. So it's going to be an extensive process, but again, they're aware of it. We've kept them apprised at CalPERS and how to address this particular pay rate with longevity. It's not necessarily a STRS or a PERS service credit. It's more, it could slightly impact the employee or the retiree's benefit. And so that's why we're being very diligent working with all these different stakeholders to ensure that that gets addressed going forward. But it's going to be definitely a collaborative effort.
Oh, thank you. I was looking at that report and seeing that, I wondered if it was part of the process of wrapping those stipends into the regular paycheck that makes it difficult to differentiate when you go back to find a base pays to that person earning. I mean, is it true that overtime is not part of the calculation for, it would be just their regular pay that's part of it that affects PERS, or is it everything like that, overtime included?
So Vanessa could probably correct me here. So we do take the baseline of their salary schedule, right, Vanessa? That's one aspect of it for PERS, right? The overtime is not included, or is that accounted for separately?
Yeah, that's correct. So for STRS, they have a supplemental kind of bank that any extra duty goes into, but not for classified PERS employees. So it's only based on their, base pay.
Right, that's what I thought.
And that's where they want us to clearly just delineate with what's the base salary to the longevity.
Right, not just the longevity, but it sounds like we need to really differentiate any of the pay and only include the base pay when we're reporting certain modules of it from here on. So however that affects our new system, I think it'll probably be easier to code things differently so that those reports are easier to pull out. I know with the current system, it may not be as as an easy process, and you are having to go back to 2015, so that's quite a big impact. I know we had another issue. I think it was with, I don't know if it was with adult ed, right? And we were trying to do some correcting there, and it was quite challenging, I believe, for the county as well, because of how that impacts staff. So is there a plan to bring in some support for this audit and this
and you're exactly right, Trustee Hall. It's kind of similar in nature, and we do have to work closely with the county. So it's the configurations, and it is something that we definitely have on our radar as we implement a new system with N4. But because a lot of this reporting is in PeopleSoft via the County Office of Ed, we've got to account for that too. So, and that's what we're trying to determine with the county office and our stakeholders with HR and payroll, what that's going to look like and what time's going to be required. So that's what hasn't been decided or kind of completed yet, because we're waiting for CalPERS to finalize that. But it will be an effort.
Right, it'll be an effort, and you may need, I mean, there's always so much of an impact on staff trying to get this new system going. So
right.
Is there an anticipation that you will need to bring in some help to complete this work?
We may, I would say from HR standpoint, they have certain items they have to complete. And then there's certain things, once that's completed on the HR, it'll shift over to payroll, and payroll will be working with the County Office of Ed on the reporting aspect of it. So I would anticipate in our areas, and Anna can certainly share from HR standpoint, but we may need to evaluate that and see where the support might come in.
Right.
Yeah, if I could just add, that's exactly what we're looking at. And what I appreciate is that rather than rush through to try and make some corrections, we've been working together to make sure that we're making the right kinds of corrections, right? Is there a patch that we can implement that will, by the push of a button, make wholehearted corrections, or and are we making the right corrections? So I think it wouldn't be that we bring other folks in, but we may need to pay our folks some overtime on a voluntary basis once we find out exactly what it is that they're asking of us.
Right. Well, I can understand that the impacts it will have, and I would say that some things, that's why differentiating codes in both systems, both the HR and the financial and the payroll, it always helps when they're differentiated out for different purposes with real clear coding, and it makes it easy to pull that information out going forward. But of course, that takes a lot of work on the back end, so we look forward to having it cleaned up, but obviously appreciate the work and the impacts to staff it will have. Thank you. So will you please, Dr. Sawkill, bring back a follow-up for this at our, of course you will, at our next audit subcommittee meeting.
Yes, we will leave it on here. I mean, it's completed from their standpoint, but not from a staff. Yes, we'll continue our work with the PERS auditors until we have what the plan will be.
Okay, thank you. And any more comments from the committee members? No? Okay. So we'll go on to the next item then. Thank you all for that. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and continue.
And then the next one, we've reached out to kind of see where the County of San Diego Health and Human Services, again, these are periodic reviews that they do of the reimbursement invoices. We had this on here the last time we met, and so we checked to see if there's any status update. So at this point, it's still status quo in that regard. So as soon as we have an update, we'll definitely relay it to the committee.
Thank you very much.
And then the next item we have as just an ongoing open, as you mentioned earlier, Trustee Hall, we do have our computer system. That's one key area that was part of that AB 139 audit from FICMAT. We continue our work. We've been working very closely with Dr. Aguirre and with others. We will have an update here to the board next month regarding the implementation team. So we continue our work in that area. And right. I think then the last few items is just again to memorialize, we'll now transition now that the committee has taken action and eventually the board. This was just to show that we've completed our 2021 audits. Those were presented to the board in December. And so with the next update, we will now replace the next fiscal year, the current year we're in, as the work that the auditors will be doing.
Correct.
Okay.
And thank you. I do want to make the point that we did get a positive certification, and that was confirmed by the County Office of Education with our first interim. And so I think that's important to understand in relation to these prior year audits when that wasn't the case, you know, in the prior years. So I'm hoping we see a significant, how that will impact our current year audit once it's completed, and the opinions of an ongoing concern. I'm hoping that we have some movement on that, and show our commitment as a board to really being mindful and thoughtful and really of where we're at with our finance. Thank you. So go ahead and.
What's that? Actually, it's a good transition, Trustee Hall, because the next item on the agenda is the first interim, and to the points that you highlighted. So if I can have, Carolina will switch over to the presentation, and I think just for the benefit of the group, I'm just going to highlight slide 13, which is our current year, and then slide 14. I think as Carolina pulls that up. So slide 13, again, we provide a snapshot because our first interim is an opportunity to look at our budget after it's been adopted, after any changes during the summer with our 45-day from the state, any updates that might be in the final budget. So you kind of see the side-by-side comparison here. So first interim gave us an opportunity to look at data through the months of October, our actuals, and kind of look at where we needed to make some updates. You can see that our, I think one key item to note is our ending fund balance. That is reflective of how then we closed the books for 2021. There were some one-time savings in essence that did end up a little bit more favorable than what was originally anticipated. So that $76 million will come into play on the next slide. But again, the revenues, as you can see, are pretty static, nothing in terms of too many changes because of our local control funding formula, looking at those variables. Where there's just some slight changes are with some staffing items. This gave us the opportunity after things settled with the startup of school, kind of seeing more staffing enrollment changes and things like that, where perhaps more staff were required. Those changes are reflected there. And as well as kind of looking at some of our other commitments. And so with this, I'd like to go to the next slide, because the next one then looks at our multi-year. And as we've shared in the past, when we bring these reports forward to the board, they're based on the latest information we have available. So at this point, it was right before the governor's proposal that was released in January. And so these multi-year projections are based on what we had at the time from the final budget in June. And so as you can see from the $76 million, that column B, I'd like to kind of share the reserves, because as Trustee Hall mentioned earlier, this was our opportunity over the course of the last few years. There's a certification process that happens every first and second interim, that the board looks at the financials for the current year and the plus 2 years out. You always look at that 3-year view. So over the course of the last few years, the district, there's 3 different certifications: negative, qualified, and positive. Negative, which is what the time in 2017-18, going into 18-19, given the district's financial position at the time, that indicated that there were some challenges to meet financial obligations over that 3-year time frame. Incrementally, we made progress over those last few years, and so last year we actually brought forward to the board a qualified certification, and that was incremental improvement. That indicated that we were able to make the obligations for 2021, but still we're looking at the out-year projections as possibly a challenge, so it was qualified. This first interim report gave us the opportunity, because as I mentioned earlier, those one-time savings from the prior year really helped shore up the ending balance and help offset what you can see in the out years in row 11, There is still a structural deficit. Our revenues are much lower, and you can see the difference from column B to C. That's attributed because in that particular year, what we've had is what's been known as the hold harmless. The state has been funding the districts throughout the state based on 2019-20 enrollment and average daily attendance. That in essence would go away come next year. So you see that catches up with the decline of enrollment that the school district's been experiencing. So you lose about $22 million. And from that, so it causes that structural deficit, looking at our expenditures, offsetting by that revenue. And so these reserves in 21-22, and very specifically like declining enrollment and contingency reserves, are helping offset that structural deficit. So you can see by 23-24, there's a remaining $3 million in the declining enrollment. This information, when we presented it to the board and then to the County Office of Ed, indicated that we have enough of those savings or reserves to help us over this 3-year time frame to indicate we will meet the obligations for the district, but we have to utilize our reserves to do so. And so with that information, they did, and as Trustee Hall mentioned, we did submit a positive certification, and they did affirm the fact that they concurred with that assessment based on the district's financials. So that's a significant improvement over the course of the last little over 3 years to get us there. One thing to note is we are now in the process of working on our second interim report, which is going to be going to the board next month. That looks at data that is actual data through the month of January. So it's July through January. We look at our actuals, and then you project and see, how things are trending for the remainder of the year. One thing that's going to be different that I'll note here now is this line 22 and line 23, because at the time we did interim, the county had indicated this LCAP money. This was new money that was provided over the summer once the state budget was complete, but it was contingent on a LCAP supplemental plan. The state didn't release that template until the fall, and then that was just recently taken to the board a few weeks ago. So the county had given us direction to not add that as an expense until this board or this item went to the board. So at second interim, you'll see this $3.4 million coming out of reserves and actually going to the appropriate budget lines. So a lot of it's going to summer school, so you'll see it in certificated salaries. There's a couple of things with supplies. So that is coming out of the reserves. The other thing that's going to be coming out of the reserves, because again, we paid that obligation, is the remaining balance that was on the supplemental retirement plan that was from 2018. The board took action on this in November, and this was paid in January. So because that payment of $7.9 million was made, that is going away from the reserve. So I just wanted to highlight that because it will reduce the reserves down to about a little over 66 million-ish or more, kind of around there. That will be a change that will be reflected in what we present next in a couple of weeks to the board, because now we've paid that off. So that reserve has been utilized. So again, what's remaining is our required 2% by the state, and then those contingencies, as I mentioned earlier, to help offset the shortfall from the revenues. On a positive note, the other factor that we will be bringing into the second interim is the fact that the governor's budget at the state level, it's about $47 billion favorable at the state level, which does trickle down to the school districts. The governor's proposal does include a cost of living adjustment. It's 5.33%. And based on those variables, it looks like it'll be an additional $11 million at this point in time to the district. And so that helps offset this $22 million that you see in row 11, column C. It would offset it by that amount because it's extra revenue. So again, that's just the starting point. We still have to wait for May revise and then how things evolve in June. But those will be upcoming changes because it's new information that we will then incorporate into the second interim.
Thank you, Dr. Sawkill. Very good information. And do you have any questions, from the committee? Ms. Schmidt?
No, just that this is our new reality. It was, I'm optimistic though that the state will hopefully provide some more funding to supplement the reserves.
The governor did, the governor recognizes Sweetwater, but obviously other districts in the state, because we've been so impacted so greatly from our average daily attendance, and that is such a key factor into what we generate as revenue for our schools. So as an example, historically, Sweetwater's been around 94% for average daily attendance. Going into second interim, we're reporting 89.1%. So just that difference alone is it significantly impacts the revenues. And so what the governor included in his proposal is a 3-year average to kind of soften that impact a little bit. So we'll see how that materializes over the next few months and into May. But we also there are various legislators who've also introduced their own bills, some looking at enrollment, some looking at different factors. There are different conditions in some cases, but again, there's a lot for us to keep an eye on over the next few months. But again, it's a positive because the folks are listening to what school districts are having to be faced with.
Also, we don't know if the COVID protocol will be changing, and that may also impact absences and having to stay out for a certain amount of time.
A lot of moving pieces, a lot of developments that are ongoing.
Thank you. Mr. Segura, or Trustee Segura, any questions?
Yes, you could call me Mr. So I appreciate all that information, Dr. Salkow and team. I'm glad you mentioned, while we are certified positive the next 3 years, which is a huge thing for us, and it's an immense amount of work that everybody did I know I've said it before, but it needs to be said every time we meet, because it is truly appreciated. And thanks to the leadership of our superintendent, and where we have large dedicated reserves for expenses that we're going to need. But we do have declining enrollment and a structural deficit. So I know we're being mindful of expenses and what we're doing with the money that we do have, and let's just hope that we will get more resources from everybody to help us through this. And the 94 to 89% daily attendance that's a big drop, and just like our the other committee member mentioned, it's due to COVID and COVID protocol, nothing that we did. We usually have a really high at most of our schools. Obviously, you have a 94. That's pretty good. But just keeping in mind all those things, and like Dr. Salkow said, there's a lot of moving parts and lots to do still, and hopefully we'll get those additional resources. But thank you for all that work.
Thank you for your comments, Trustee Segura. Totally agree with everything you said. What I do have a question about the COLA and what that means. Is that only onto the base of the LCFF? And does it disappear after this year? How does that COLA work in going forward with other years? Because do you automatically factor that in and it continues on, or does that go away from year to year and you have to take each year's proposal as a separate proposal? So how does that work, Dr. Salkow?
So we receive a calculator from FCMAT, and how that is built into that calculator. So they build in 5.33 for that given year. And then again, we have assumptions for the out years. So then that kind of is that new baseline. And then next year, I want to say it's a little over 3% the following year. So then that adds on top to that base.
Okay,
so it kind of re-benchmarks that every year. Every time there's an increase, it becomes that new level.
And that's at the base of the base LCFF. It doesn't have anything to do with the other programs?
That COLA sometimes does apply for other programs, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. That's good to know. It's always good to clarify that to make sure we all understand it going forward. Thank you. So in that figuring, in your calculations in the out years, you've already had that assumption of the 5.33, Or
Yes.
did that, okay.
That comes right built into the calculator. All those formulas are built in, and then we also we've done this now for the last few years. Every time we do an update to the calculator, we also provide it to the County Office of Education to review it. So that's our second set of eyes, but that's all built into what FCMAT builds into those numbers.
Right, and the county actually, I know the state puts out the parameters for what the considerations are at each interim for that particular interim, and then the county also does as well, correct?
Correct.
So they would be kind of layering into whatever the proposals are, what their expectations are, and what the framework that they expect. So we can't move outside that framework. We have to operate within the framework laid out by the state and the county.
Correct.
No matter what, if we agree or disagree, that's just where we're at, right?
Right, correct. And that's where you'll see like what Carolina has up here, like the interim letter, they highlight you use this particular assumption. And so, yes, they have guidance that we get from the state. They also issue what they call the common guidance, the common message amongst county offices of ed throughout the state. So yes, they do highlight. If we were to deviate from that, they would make a comment.
Yeah, they would probably deny it and send it back to us, right? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. If there's no further questions, we'll move on to the next item.
Okay. So the next
next
item, yes, the request for proposals for underwriters is just to provide the committee an update because it is financial in nature. We are looking to possibly do a bond offering in the fall for not only our Proposition O, but also the inaugural issuance for Measure DD. Since it was passed by the taxpayers in 2018. Now that we have a couple of open matters that were open matters behind us, we're able to start evaluating that. And so we're looking to build our financing team and the underwriters. If you recall, we brought that forward to the board in May of 2019 for a 3-year agreement. So we need to prepare and go out for a solicitation, look at various basically bankers and underwriters. We had a group of 4 last time. And so we'd like to start that process here in the next month or so that we can bring a recommendation to the board by May, June timeframe. So that way we can start to build that team, start building all the other stakeholders so that we can commence the work that's necessary for a bond financing in the fall. And so just providing the committee an update because it is financial in nature so that way you're aware of that. That'd be forthcoming. Oh, Trustee Hall, you're muted.
That's actually good news. I appreciate that. You're thinking forward thinking and you're actually looking to serve our schools with the needs that we have, and so many of our facility needs are really, yeah, that'll be good. So is there any input from this committee that you need regarding this RFP?
I mean, if there's any recommendations or anything, I think it's just a lot of it. We're going to be asking them questions about possible structuring ideas. They take a look at our existing debt, particularly with Prop O and so forth. So we'll ask questions as it's part of the solicitation if there are any ideas for existing debt, but then also looking for new debt, particularly when you have a new bond program such as Measure DD. We can establish that structure. It's going to be so important. It'll be foundational how we structure that. So it'll be good for us to ask questions from the underwriters or prospective underwriters, what their ideas might be. And then that would be something eventually we would bring forward to the board. Because there's when it's a brand new issuance, you can look at short-term issuances, long-term issuance, everything. It all depends back to the project plan. What do we have that we anticipate so we can structure that initial one accordingly. And then that helps build going forward that model.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that clarity. And that RFP will be published when?
We're looking probably in the next month or so.
Okay, and then it takes about how long does, I know we have Donald, is it Donald Prince? That's yes. The head of the purchasing department. How long would that normally take for that process? Is it a 6 weeks or is it longer than 6 weeks for that once it's published?
Don, would you explain that from the time that we advertise and then interview and so forth to the selection?
Okay, good afternoon. That generally takes you correct about 6 weeks. It's got to be advertised for 2 weeks. There's a period for questions, response, and then it has to be evaluated. So usually you're correct about 6 weeks from the time it's published.
All right, thank you. All right, any questions from anyone else on the committee regarding this item?
Oh, I don't have any questions, but that's just awesome news. I'm really glad to that point where, you know, I was hoping that was going to happen this year, but wasn't sure like we all were, but that's just awesome. And I look forward to that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so our next item is internal audit items, and I know we have our internal auditors on the line along with the Director of Compliance. Is that correct, Mr. Hughes? So I'll let them go ahead, Dr. Sawkill, if you
Yes,
want.
definitely. Yes, I think they'll present those areas. Yes.
Thank you.
Me okay?
Can't really hear you.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, good evening. This is Daphne Enriquez. The first agenda item is to report the department's status on internal audit work plan items that was referred to as the ongoing and completed. There is not a lot of detail, so I believe we may be able to quickly scroll through this. On pages 1 through 3, there are a few marked areas as ongoing, such as the work with the fraud hotline, time and effort reporting, the unduplicated count, ASB audits and instructional minutes, as well as non-audit work such as that performed for the ASB financial statements. We can go down to page 3. Again, that's non-audit services. Page 4 includes the reports that have been issued. Those that are grayed out were presented to the committee during prior meetings. Those in white towards the bottom are included as part of the current agenda and the next item. Most of those were ASB audits. And it's noted at the bottom there that the reports that we present as the next item are for completed engagements. They're considered complete when the action plans, if there were any findings, have been received. So if you'd like to move on to the next item, those would be the reports that are summarized. So again, if we look at this first one, this
Before, excuse me, Daphne, if you don't mind, on your ongoing and completed template that you have, I had a question about some of the, like the student services attendance reporting and instructional minutes, those kinds of things. Are you getting the information you need from staff to complete these audits, and you're just working through it, or is there other reasons for it to be pending?
If it's pending, it's just an audit that we have not yet started our work with. If it's ongoing, we're in the process of that audit. We haven't had any issues with getting information that's needed. The timing of our audits may depend a lot on when we get the information, or if there's just open items, or sometimes we need to follow up with the CIDR department for additional information or for clarification. Sometimes there's additional sample selections that may be made. So there's several factors that goes into the timing and the completion of those audits, but we're on track. We hired a new staff auditor this month, so there's work involved in training him, and he's already started on the work developed from our internal audit work plan. So we're hoping this year that we'll get caught up on a lot of these pending items.
All right, that's good. All right, any other questions from the committee on this part of their presentation? If not, we'll move forward to the next section, which is the reports provided. You can go ahead, Daphne.
Okay, so this is just an example of the reports. This one was issued to Southwest High School. It's one of the ASB audits. If you scroll through to the end, this particular one had findings, so there was a corrective action plan requested from the site. Not sure which page it's in, but we'll see the site's letterhead, and that'll be when the corrective action plan starts.
Right. Can you stop there? Because I had a point I was going to ask about the interaction with the sites, and when you're interacting with other managers at departments, do you find that you're getting timely responses? This one response from Southwest, although you did receive a response. I noticed that with the other reports that you provided for this item, the principal actually was the one responding and with the action steps that they were going to take. This was it. This is one pager, and I didn't know if there was really who it was that provided it, and that they had really. I would like to see these signed off by the principal when they send them in, and not just nobody's taking responsibility for providing it. So how does that come to you, and how quickly do you get responses? And is the principal in any way involved at the steps where they're responding, and how the follow-up goes with that? Especially like I think on one of these you had a prior year findings that you were following up on. So can you go into that a little bit for us, please?
Sure. Well, typically during the audit, during the planning stages, we issue something referred to as an engagement letter, where we state the objective and the scope of the audit, and that is issued to the principal at the site as well as the ASB administrator or advisor. During the field work, we work with the administrator and the advisor as well as the accounting technician to complete our test work. That's requesting information and if there's any follow-up. After that test work, once our work papers are reviewed, we issue preliminary observations or findings to the principal as well as the ASB advisor and administrator, and we solicit their feedback. We're open to discuss those items if they have any questions or if they can still clear some of those items. After that, we issue a draft report, and then the report's finalized. In that, we note if there's findings that a corrective action is requested to be provided within 30 days of the date that the report is issued. And we typically receive it within that time frame. If not, we do follow up, and sometimes it takes a little bit more than the 30 days, but not so much over. So yes, we do request for these action plans to be provided by the principal. In prior years, we did have a template in which there was a space indicated for the principal to sign. So right now there is no standardized format, but we can always go back to either providing that type of template or just being clear on the expectations, such as having the principal sign these moving forward.
Well, personally, as a board member, I would think that the principal needs to be responsible, especially when it's in the role of oversight for these things. So yes, I think they need to be signing off on them, the responses for that. But I'll defer to Dr. Aguirre and our other committee members, and perhaps Mr. Segura, Trustee Segura, if he has any strong feelings about it. So I would say yes, we need to require the principals to sign off on it.
And Trustee Hall, I've had conversations with Dr. Sokeld about on the front end before these are completed to make sure we communicate those expectations to our principals. So it's something that we definitely are looking at. I think the first part begins with managing the expectations effectively. So maybe sharing that out at an all principals meeting or something along those lines, so that they can understand that That's an expectation. As a principal, you're expected. We understand that there's assistant principals and others that may undertake the work, but at the end of the day, our expectation as a team, as a leadership team, is that a principal has a clear understanding of what's happening at their site. So that is something we can look at.
All right, thank you for that, Dr. Aguirre. Any questions from the committee members on these items? Ms. Schmidt? You're muted. It's not working. I can't unmute you, I don't think. Let me see. Nope. All right, well, if you have a question, are you sure you can't unmute? Okay. All right, well, Mr. Segura, or Trustee Segura, do you have any questions on this item? On the reports from the students? I mean, I know that Dr. Aguirre will support staff. I hope that in working individually as internal auditors, there's that framework for them to be able to be at the level where when they need that information, they're operating in a manner that they can get that and get the communication without too much trouble from the sites. So however we can do that or to work that well, I think is important. Go ahead, Daphne. You still have something on the fraud hotline?
Yes. The last item is the most recent quarterly report issued for the district fraud hotline that describes for the period ending December 31st, there were 2 new fraud hotline submissions. Is that item available? So at the bottom of this, it's noted that year to date, on the bottom of this first page, there have been 4 reports or submissions, and at the last quarter end, 2 were closed as they were investigated and determined that the allegations were either not substantiated or there was not enough information to investigate. Those cases are summarized on page 2 of this document. Since most of these were considered non-fraud related, they were investigated by Mr. Robert Hughes, the district's chief compliance officer, who is also available this evening if you have any questions for him.
All right, thank you. All right, somebody's got a lot of background going on there. So, thank you. Mr. Hughes, do you have anything to say? Do you have anything to add to this presentation? Do you want to kind of help us understand these different?
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure. So as Daphne said, typically when a fraud hotline concern comes in from our third-party provider, Integrity Counts, she and I will be notified via email, and we'll have a brief discussion about what the nature of the complaint or the concern is. A lot of times they're very short and succinct claims, and a lot of times, the vast majority of times, they do not involve financial fraud. So Daphne will defer the investigation part to our office. Our office will then contact the appropriate administrator to investigate and follow that investigation to the point where we issue a closure letter to the person who complained. If that person has selected the absolute anonymity toggle on the Integrity Counts fraud hotline, then we will work through the third party to get them that document. Sometimes they do, in fact, put their contact information and their name, and then we can work with them directly. So for this past quarter, we've had 2 that were closed. One was unsubstantiated. It had to do with whether or not particular students were domiciled in the residency that they were claiming. One had to do with adult schools and testing called CASAS testing, the Comprehensive Adult School Systems test, which is required by the state, but the students did not understand that, so they were being brought out of class to have that test and felt like it was prohibitive to their classes. And then we've had a very just direct one sentence handwritten letter from the U.S. Post Office in an envelope that just made a very strange one sentence claim that it wasn't even worth investigating because it was just kind of a broadside with no particular details. And finally, we have one that's going to be closed very soon, but it involved a situation where people parted ways in a civil matter, and documents from an employee were left behind.
Thank you. And I did have a question about this, the item 3 on there.
Sure.
Where it's the one you said had the anonymous letter, but it said the district wasn't able to contact the reporter. So it did have it wasn't anonymous if you knew it was from a reporter. I don't understand it.
Yeah, so this actually did not come into the fraud hotline. Daphne and I had a discussion about this. This was a stamped letter that was sent to the district with no return address, no name. It came from the U.S., like the regular U.S. mail, but because it came to us, we wanted to document it here. And essentially, it was a one sentence statement, something to the effect of follow the money and you'll find where the money is, something to that effect, but there was no actual person attached to it.
Thank you for that clarification. So oh, you meant like they were reporting something, so it was the person. I get it.
Yeah.
That threw me, like it was coming from a news or a journalist, but that's not the case. It was the reporter of supposed fraud, but no details. Okay. Makes sense, and I appreciate that you included it on here. I think that's very important.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. Are there any questions from anyone else on the committee regarding this item?
Sorry about that.
Okay.
My Wi-Fi stalled.
Are you ready?
No, just on number 4. So is that going to be closed or regarding the documents that were returned or?
Yeah, we have the documents. Daphne and I have reviewed them. We just have one more step to do the closure for that case, and it will be closed probably this week.
Just very interesting random cases on here. I guess that's the norm, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because again, I know the intent of the district was set up this financial fraud hotline, but we get everything, a lot of different things. So
that's good. You're transparent with all these cases. So thank you.
Sure thing.
Thank you very much. Did you have questions, Ms. Schmidt, on the other internal audit items before we move on?
No, I just wanted to say I agreed regarding the principals and their involvement in this. So I just wanted to agree with you on that.
Right, thank you. I appreciate that. So we'll move on then. Thank you, Mr. Hughes and Daphne Enriquez. We really appreciate your presentation and the work that internal audit and the compliance department both do for our school district. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next item, which is reviewing our charter for 22-23. And the reason why we're bringing this back is because of I think we need to add some language to this charter in order to give us flexibility about the community members on the committee. And so while you see on our existing charter, there is at the committee membership in that section where it reads the 2 community members will serve a 1-year term with 2-term limit option. And the proposal before us today is to change this to where we have a little bit more ability to have a continuance of the community members on the committee for a period that's a little longer, should they be available to do that. And it suggested that we change that language after that one sentence where it says term limit option, that we add the sentence, in the event of a vacancy, the 2 board members will appoint an interim community member for the remainder of the 1-year term. But I think we really want to add that change it to a 4-year term limit option, or a maximum of a 4-year term. So they could have 2-year terms maximized at 4 years, and that at that point they would no longer be eligible to serve. That's the first consideration. Is, you know, we're finding that everybody isn't just jumping on board to come onto this committee as a community member, and we really need them. And Lisa, you've been great being part of this year. We'd like to see the service continue and have some continuity, because it is a lot of information. There's a lot of background that's learned throughout the process of a year, but just leaving that after 1 year it's sort of doesn't serve the district well, or this committee well. So we're trying to, I'm bringing forth a proposal that we modify the language a bit. So Dr. Aguirre or Dr. Sawkill, would you like to?
Yeah, so thank you, Trustee Hall. I think in essence, what I heard you is the 4-year maximum, which makes sense, because in that way it kind of aligns with the term of a trustee. The question is, how do you get there? Do you get there by 4 1-year terms or 2 2-year terms? And that really is, I think, at the pleasure of the committee, and to make it a recommendation for the full board to consider. I do think it makes sense. It takes about a good, good amount of time, maybe 6 months, 8 months, to kind of get in the kind of build up that capacity, if you will. And then after that, to kind of, if somebody decides they no longer want to serve, it's that 1 year, and then you lose some of that institutional knowledge. So I do think a 4-year makes sense. But in essence, those are the choices. As I heard you, Trustee Hall, is either 4 1-year terms or 2 2-year terms. And again, a 4-year max does make sense rather than a 2-year max. 2 years does seem like it's you're barely getting into the kind of the flow of the meetings and the information, and then could not be there. So I think 4 years makes sense. It's how you get there.
Thank you, Dr. Aguirre. I think that was the first change we wanted to discuss was, do we make it a 2-year term, not just a 1-year term? And then you would serve 2-year terms at the max, like with the possibility or eligible to serve a second 2-year term. Or do we make it 1-year terms for a maximum of 4 terms? I don't know. What is the committee's feeling on that?
I would be all for a maximum of 4 years, serving a 2-year terms. That makes sense to me.
Okay. How about Lisa?
I'm definitely in favor of something greater than a 1-year term. Like was mentioned before, there's a lot of information to learn and absorb, and I'm still learning as a new member, so I feel that it's to an advantage too to have that knowledge and experience. Selfishly speaking, my son starts high school, my youngest, in 5 years, but I'll be termed out by then. But I think that anything greater than a year is really helpful to the board.
Yeah, okay. So I would say that we would like to change the language to have the 2 community members will serve a 2-year term with a 2-term limit option. So if that would be good. And my other item to discuss, and I think would be, should there be a vacancy mid-year, and for whatever reason a person steps down, we have a vacancy, instead of waiting for another year or whatever to go by to open up the application process. If and to have it go back to the board before the person really comes back to serve, I would like to add language that the board members on the two board members will appoint an interim community member for the remainder of the term. So whatever term that is, it gives us the option as board members to fill that term, to fill that seat by somebody that could, meet the obligations of being on the committee, but also have some of the knowledge and the connection to our schools, which I think our board would really appreciate having that flexibility. And I don't know, Mr. Trustee Segura, if you'd like to weigh on that. It could either be the committee chair or the two board members together decide and then make that appointment.
Yeah, I don't really have a preference. I mean, either way,
Okay.
yeah, works for me.
So in the event of this is the language we'll add, in the event of a vacancy, the two board members will appoint an interim community member for the remaining of the term, of the vacant term. Would that make sense? So we are not defining 1 year term or 1 year term. It'll be for whatever that vacancy is for. We'll take that recommendation to the board at our March meeting so that we can get moving on this and get our other community member on the team. I think it brings validity to the work, but also maybe we can stagger those community member terms so we don't have two new people every time, but we have a new community member every other year so that those that have already served can kind of help with the new member and help our board members kind of introduce them to the different things that go on in our committee. Go ahead,
So
Dr.
Trustee Hall, I think Caroline is pulling up the recommendation. This is under the charter, and I think there's a connection also to the board policy. Does this look okay here?
I don't know. I can't really see it that far away.
But
what I think she had on the one I received was not.
Yeah, this is the language that you're indicating. The 2
2-year term with a 2-term limit option. In the event of vacancy, will appoint a community member for the remaining of the vacant term. Correct. And that.
And then this will also, so that last statement is what's going to be incorporated into the board policy, because this one's the charter. And then
Right,
the board policy.
right. Well, what I wanted to ask is, what we're trying to do here is allow this committee to operate and to get that third member, like the second community member on board without having going back and getting it approved by the board beforehand. So if that's the language that will do that on the board policy, that will work.
Yeah, Trustee Hall, I might suggest that I can work with Dr. Sacco, but in essence, it's the two board members on this committee will be delegated with the authority by the full board to make this interim.
Okay, that'd be great.
It's a delegated duty. Yeah. The other thing I want to share, that first sentence could potentially be a little confusing, where it says two community members will serve a 2-year term with a 2-term limit option.
Right.
Well, I see what it says. It says 2-term limit. So in essence, what we're saying is 4 years.
4 years.
It's 4 years. You might want to put it in brackets just so it's real clear. 2-term limit, and then put brackets for a max of 4 years. Because I think that's ultimately what we're trying to say. Is it's
correct.
2-term limit.
That'd be great. So if you could work on that, we'd really appreciate that.
And then I think there's also an impact to the board policy, which I think is what Dr. Sacco was trying to, so that we align the charter, but also the board policy.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask Ms. Zimmerman to bring that up.
Did you make the change on that one too, Carolina?
No, not yet. I'm was trying to manipulate the items here, so I have not made the change yet, but I can certainly make it consistent with what we have in the charter.
And then this is what we would bring forward to the board, as you mentioned, Trustee Hall, to the March 14th meeting.
So in the event of a community member vacancy, the board will delegate to the 2 board members, or the 2 board members serving on the committee will be delegated by the Board of Trustees the ability to appoint an interim community member for the remainder of the 2-year term. Correct?
Yes. But it's a 2-year term towards the end.
Yeah. And then the end, yeah.
Or you don't even need to qualify. You just say for the remainder of the term.
The term.
Of the
right,
vacant,
remainder of the term.
vacant term.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would be. I think, does the Board of Trustees, should that be capitalized? I never get that stuff right. But it's capitalized in the next sentence, but not in the red.
Oh, yeah. Then it should definitely be capitalized. You are correct, Trustee Hall.
And it makes reference to board throughout the other paragraphs, so we'll just capitalize board.
We will keep it consistent throughout.
All right, thank you.
And Deanne will review this too before we submit it, so we'll.
Right, great, awesome. So I think that will meet our discussion. Everybody on the committee is in favor, correct? All right. So everybody gave their hands their high five. All right, so the next item, thank you for that work. And Carolina, we appreciate your ability to manipulate those different screens and documents. So thank you very much for that. And Dr. Aguirre, thank you for your ability to communicate so well. So now that's the review of the minutes is next. Did you all have a time to review the minutes? And did you have any questions or concerns?
No, I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I second.
Right. So I have, and I'm in favor as well. So we'll just say that, yes, those are approved. Thank you for that. Motion by Segura, second by Schmidt. All right. Now it's time for the board, the calendar of meetings.
And so Trustee Hall, we're providing you a draft kind of as we plan ahead into next year. The meetings right now it's noted here July, October, December, and then March of the following year. We've noted here that the specific items we would cover, we would have the first 3 are external auditors. They would provide updates to the field work. And then by December 5th, the final or draft audit to take forward to the board. And then also with the various reports that we have throughout the year, as noted.
All right. Ms. Schmidt.
Is that, I guess, customary to the next meeting won't be till July, though this will be the last meeting of the school year?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we've scheduled some as needed, but I think what we have now ahead is once the auditors start their work in May, they'll start to do some of that, and that's when they provide an update in July.
Okay.
So that's kind of, yeah.
Well, in the past, we were having, I think, a meeting around May for the second interim, but I don't know that it's necessary at this point because, as you know, there's so much movement between second interim and the final budget and things that really July makes sense. for us to get that full picture and to really move forward into the next fiscal year and actually have some more information from our external auditors as well will be helpful. So yeah, I'm fine with the calendar. Thank you.
May's our crazy time, budget time at the city, so I'm good with that.
Yes. Yes. Well, there's never ever a time down for finance. Tell you, it never really does have a downtime. Okay, so thank you very much for that, and we accept that recommendation for our calendar of meetings. And next we have a committee member comments. Anyone want to add to our discussion or to complete our meeting today with any input or observation? Go ahead.
No, I just want to thank Dr. Stekeld and the team and everyone for all their work and making it easy for me to digest and comprehend. And I really enjoy serving, and for your leadership too, Trustee Hall.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate everyone's hard work, and I know Trustee Segura does as well. We've really been the tremendous processes have been put in place. Really, just really a lot of work has been done by the teams, and I know that we value that as a board of trustees and as community members. We all value that. It is the basis by which this district operates, right? Without the finance teams, we would not be able to operate and really do what we need to do for our community. So it's so important. We thank you all for that. And I will take back the recommendation to the board to accept the audit engagements as proposed, and that I don't know if you're going to talk about the underwriting RFP going out, but I can report to that as well to the board, and I will take them the recommendation that they accept the changes to our charter and the board policy, and we'll see you in our next meeting. Right? Trustee Segura, did you have anything to add?
Oh, no, I just, just thinking that appreciating how smooth our meetings are running, knock on wood, it's really, we've come a long way, and we want to stay here, and we all recognize that, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Yes, very much so. Thank you. Dr. Aguirre.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. I think Trustee Segura is reading my mind, because I was having a very similar thought. It just feels like we've come out of this hurricane that battered us, but we've come out stronger. And I'm just really appreciating the support from this committee, from trustees, from Ms. Schmidt, and from our staff to be able to get to a place. Now it's a matter of maintaining and ensuring that we put in place all those things that allow us to be here. But it really is important to know that we're doing this as a governance team. To be able to do those things that allow us to ensure that we can be stable financially, because then that means we can be stable instructionally and academically, and really support the core mission of what we do, is to make sure our students are learning how to be contributing citizens in our democracy. And given all the instability that's going on in the world, it's so critical that we offer a quality education to all of our students here in the South Bay. So it's a team that's doing this, and I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Aguirre. Really, the governance team has come a long way. We've done really a terrific shift, and we are very appreciative, and we do need to move this forward. The good news needs to get around that Sweetwater has really come a long way, and we are doing all the good things, that not just from all perspectives and on all fronts, and I really appreciate that. So thank you all, and I hope you all have a really wonderful evening, well-deserved break. So good night.
Night.
Good night.
Buddy, thank you.